Hi, and welcome back to the Contemporary Old West with B.F. Biles. If you enjoy Westerns, I hope you'll hit the subscribe and notification icons. I'd truly appreciate your support. If you're enjoying the story and you're interested in a copy of my novel, Hunting Charm, you can check my Amazon page or contact me directly through my Patreon page. I'll have links to both in the description below. Any support is deeply appreciated. In today's episode, you'll hear Chapter 12 of Hunting Charm, Cactus Branch and His Angel. If you haven't listened to the previous chapters, I recommend you do so. I have the first 11 chapters in a playlist, also linked below. In today's Plate of History Beans, I'll look briefly at some of the religious beliefs and spiritual practices of the Five Civilized Tribes. In Chapter 12 of Hunting Charm, we learn more about Henry Cactus Branch Walker, including how Jake McQueen purchased Henry because the troubled slave reminded him of his mother, a woman who angered the snake god and was transformed into a shadow of herself after being bitten by a rattlesnake. In addition to the story about Jake's mother, Henry meets Doreen Tarwater face to face for the first time. Their encounter is startling for both Henry and Doreen in a way that is initially humorous. Long term, however, the event that occurs between them proves to have profound consequences going forward in the story. So without further ado, here's Chapter 12 of Hunting Charm, Cactus Branch and His Angel. Chapter 12, Cactus Branch and His Angel. At the slave auction, when Jake first examined Henry, he noted the young man's malformed shoulder and knitted brow. He feared Henry's injury might prevent him from doing much work, but he saw something else, a ghost from his past. Jake didn't know at the time that his investment would pay off handsomely. He only saw an inexplicable connection to his own past. Jake's mother had died when he was 14. Her memory floated in the Creek chief's mind like an owl silhouetted upon a full moon. The Muskogee had called her Crazed Tongue, but Jake's father told his son that in her youth his mother had been named Cactus Blossom. Jake never knew Cactus Blossom, only Crazed Tongue. As he grew older, he learned that his once beautiful mother had angered the snake god, who sent his servant to her lodge one night to bite her on the shoulder. The venom entered Cactus Blossom's right arm and the right side of her head. As a result, Cactus Blossom's mouth and right eye sagged, and her voice, once musical and lively, became a hoarse rasp. Her right arm, though not totally immobilized by the bite, shriveled over time. That was when the tribe began calling her Crazed Tongue. Jake's memories of Crazed Tongue were both vague and haunting. There had been moments when his mother, eyes downcast, held him tenderly and whispered softly of her love. Other times she behaved in unpredictable ways, menacing him with her claw-like right hand or ranting at a perceived slight or a failure to meet her eccentric standards. When Jake traded for Henry, he began calling his new slave Cactus Branch. Most believed the name reflected Henry's appearance. The man was crooked like the branch of a cholla cactus. In Jake's mind, however, and in the mind of a few others that knew the story of Crazed Tongue, Cactus Branch, with its resemblance to the name Cactus Blossom, seemed the perfect label for the odd reincarnation of Jake's long-deceased mother. Life among the Muskogee proved difficult for Henry. Like Cynthia Johnson, he found the tribal customs confusing. None of the Creek people or even the other slaves spoke to him. Most of them knew little or no English. They were unnerved by the odd-looking man who towered over everyone, but Henry performed his chores well, ate what he was given, and at first slept outside with the dogs. So for a time little was said about the newest member of Jake's household. Unfortunately, it wasn't long before some of the Creek people began gossiping about Henry. Like the slaves had done at Rosewood, whispers suggested Henry might bring misfortune upon the tribe. Jake assured them that Henry appeared troubled because of his suffering. Even so, there was talk of Henry's banishment. Fortunately, an elderly healer, curious about Henry, examined his injuries and even gave him tribal remedies to ease the pain that often troubled him. The medicine woman also cut snippets of Henry's hair and claimed they added potency to her concoctions. Gradually, talk of banishment dwindled. Even so, the rumors assured that Henry remained friendless. In his world of harsh servitude, superstition, and isolation, Henry's dreams of an angel grew more nuanced and persistent. Henry's angel, as already described, first appeared hovering before him with long blonde hair. As the dreams grew more detailed, his blonde-haired angel took Henry to an enormous house with winding hallways, grand rooms, and tables laden with rich meats, fruits, and sweet cakes. Within the grand house, Henry's shoulder and shriveled arm were whole. The women and men there spoke to him in a respectful manner, listened to his thoughts, and comforted him. Henry would awaken from such dreams, imagining he lived as others did, as a part of a community. In a sense, the dreams made life tolerable. They gave Henry faith that something might exist beyond his world of suffering. The dreams even gave him a sense of empathy for others. Consequently, Henry strove to better himself and began devising ways to compensate for his handicap. He learned to handle a plow by looping the reins around his neck and down to his one good hand. Then, by standing between the wooden handles of the implement, he could grasp the plow's right handle with his partially shriveled hand and cut deep and straight furrows. Henry learned other skills. Naturally right-handed, he learned to grasp nails with his damaged hand and the hammer with his left. He fashioned a set of clamps and a table with guideposts and taught himself woodworking. Later, out of necessity, he even discovered ways of cold-working metal and crafted hinges, metal fittings, and even crude tools. Jake McQueen, ever aware of Cactus Branch, first realized he had made a significant investment when Henry built a door and windows for Jake's adobe home. Henry's window sealed seamlessly and opened easily to allow a breeze inside during the humid summer. Henry's door, likewise, fit tightly and hung perfectly on hinges Henry cut from an old barrel ring. Jake decided Henry needed better tools and purchased a drill, a pair of cross-cut saws for felling trees, and portable milling bars to create boards. In addition, Jake, over time, gave Henry forged steel chisels, block planes, and coping and mitering saws. In each case, if Henry didn't already know how to use a tool, he worked diligently to learn. Over time, Henry's expertise became widely known. When an aunt or uncle, cousin, or nephew started a new construction project, Jake sent Henry to do the work. As demand for Henry's time grew, the Creek leader gave him mules to carry his tools. Before long, the carpenter with the curved shoulder and damaged arm earned the unspoken respect of his community. Everyone knew of the quality of Henry's work. Unfortunately, Respect did not translate to friendship or even acceptance. People simply didn't know how to approach Henry. Consequently, the strange carpenter with bulging muscles and knitted brow remained alone, living in a world where he rarely spoke or was spoken to. As already stated, when Henry saw Cecil Johnson's loaded wagons pass on that late April afternoon, his eyes fell immediately on Doreen Tarwater. He had never spoken to anyone about his dreams. Truth be told, Henry regarded the dreams, for the most part, as a manifestation of his own suffering. After all, unless one counts profound loneliness as a mental illness, Henry wasn't crazy. Nevertheless, on that afternoon when he saw Doreen Tarwater in the distance, Henry thought about his dreams. He left his porch and followed Cecil's wagon, careful to remain unseen. Familiar with the area, Henry found a hiding spot and watched as Doreen stepped down from the wagon. His heart racing, he continued to watch as she gathered her things and stood to one side as Cecil greeted Cynthia and the children. Henry might have turned away to return home after Doreen disappeared inside the barn, but curiosity held him there. He waited for nearly an hour until Cecil's daughter toddled across the yard to the barn carrying a plate. For the briefest moment, the woman appeared, then was gone again. He considered leaving then, but another idea had already occurred to him. As darkness fell, he crept near the barn. He noted the poorly fitted windows and felt a twinge of annoyance. He had tried to help with construction of the barn, but Johnson had insisted upon doing the work himself. On this occasion, the loose-fitting window served Henry's purpose. A small gap in a corner of the frame allowed him to peek inside, where Doreen sat, illuminated by a flickering lamp. She had removed her dress and wore only a thin cotton blouse and petticoat. The sight of the young woman aroused Henry. Before slipping a hand inside his trousers, as he sometimes did, to relieve his sexual desire, however, he mentally scolded himself. If this was his angel, God hadn't sent her for his gratification. Henry realized that God probably hadn't sent Doreen. He told himself she had undoubtedly arrived via some whim of circumstance. Still, the woman's similarity to the woman in his dreams seemed like too much to ignore. He had to know what had brought the woman there, though he had no idea how he might answer the question. With that thought in mind, he turned from the window. As he did so, however, he stumbled on a clump of grass. To avoid falling, he threw himself against the laid stone wall of Cecil's barn, sending bits of loose rocks scattering to the ground. Feeling certain Doreen must have heard something inside, he hustled away. He had only gone a few feet when he heard Doreen's voice. "Who is that there? Is that Mr. Johnson?" Doreen had stepped outside. "Mr. Johnson, is that you?" For a long moment, Cactus Branch fought the urge to run, but something held him there. Was this a chance, perhaps, to answer his question? So he spoke, his voice quavering. "No, ma'am, this ain't Mr. Johnson." "Is it Mr. Sugars?" "No, ain't Mr. Sugars neither. I am Henry. The name is Henry. Folks round here calls me Cactus Branch." Doreen squinted, unable to see, because the new arrival, Cactus Branch, stood in the shadows of a stand of red oaks. The man's voice didn't sound unkind. "I'm still a little hungry and thought maybe Mrs. Johnson might bring a bit more dinner," she said. "Do you live here?" "No, ma'am, I live just up the road. I seen you come in and I Henry paused, realizing he couldn't tell the woman he had been spying upon her. I reckon they'd give you more to eat if you was to ask. Then, almost as if he couldn't help himself, Henry asked the question foremost on his mind. Are you an angel?
I'm sorry, what was that? Did you ask if I'm an angel?
Yes, I know the question. Thing is, I done read on angels in the Bible. You ain't no angel, is you? Doreen felt herself blushing and, despite the odd circumstances, felt flattered.
I've been called an angel before, she said, then added, but I don't know if I feel it's appropriate for a colored boy to use such familiar language.
Doreen's response left Henry feeling weak in the knees. Moments earlier, doubts about the woman had flooded his mind. Now she had spoken directly to him and seemed unafraid. It didn't occur to Henry that Doreen couldn't see him in the darkness. His only thought was that the woman had told him that she was, in fact, an angel. Doreen, on the other hand, felt a sensation of her own. After several days in a boring wagon and months of house arrest, she had grown increasingly restless. Before the botched abortion, she had been accustomed to regular sexual encounters with Billy Dixon or one of the other locals. The day she left town, Dixon had refused her advances, saying it was too early in the day. In short, she had over 6 months of pent-up sexual desire stewing inside, and it didn't matter much who the stranger was standing before her, and he had called her his angel.
Why don't you come a little closer? I can hardly see you, she said.
In a daze, Henry stumbled forward, barely able to keep his footing. From the moment he had first looked through the poorly fitted window frame at Doreen in her undershirt, his John Henry had been throbbing. He sensed her mood, and despite alarm bells ringing in his brain, he could not stop himself. Doreen squinted again, blinking to see more clearly. Unfortunately, the overcast night, without even a flickering candle to illuminate things, rendered the approaching man nearly invisible. She could vaguely see what appeared to be a sack or something on his right shoulder, and wondered why he didn't place the bag on the ground. As the man drew closer, she felt her sexual excitement rise. She placed her hand against the front of Henry's trousers.
"Oh, my,"
she said. The encounter lasted only a few seconds, but in those fleeting moments, Henry's conception of the world changed. When Doreen Tarwater unbuttoned his jeans and took him in her hand, her touch affected the former slave so intensely that his John Henry instantly discharged a flood of viscous fluid. For a normal person in normal circumstances, the event might have been fodder for a crude bit of humor. For Henry, though, the release provoked a combination of panic and what might be called enlightenment. Without thought or hesitation, still moaning from his violent orgasm, Cactus Branch turned and ran. As for Doreen, she had experienced men who came quickly, but nothing like this. She hadn't even had time to get her bloomers down before the man began ejaculating. Then, an instant later, he sprang away, moaning like a wounded animal. "Where are you going?" she called out.
"There ain't no need to run."
Then her words caught in her throat. The moon that had been hiding behind a bank of clouds suddenly illuminated the prairie. 30 yards away, she saw Henry Walker clearly for the first time. In today's plate of history beans, I originally thought I might look at the broader topic of religion or spiritual practices of the Five Civilized Tribes. I knew the topic was impossibly large, so I'm going to offer a few general truths about the religious practices of the Creek, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Seminole, and Choctaw people, then focus upon one major celebration these folks still celebrate nowadays. To my way of thinking, the Five Civilized Tribes, generally speaking, have very pragmatic views about spirituality. The belief system of the five tribes are generally monotheistic, though there are many forces of nature that these folks recognize, such as the snake god I mentioned in Chapter 12 of Hunting Charm. Since Hunting Charm is set in part in central Oklahoma in what was called Creek or Muskogee territory, I will add a couple of notes to illustrate my assertion that the five tribes had monotheistic religions that centered mainly around nature. The Creek tribe believed the world is guided by a single great force they call Ibafanga. Pardon the pronunciation. Ibafanga is genderless and permeates all things, plants, animals, and people, though it may be manifested by a number of factors. The Greek people believe that man can communicate with the spiritual world and that Ibafanga offers guidance for any man open to hearing nature. In Ibafanga, plants, animals, and men are a combination of four elements: mind, body, spirit, and sickness or illness. Each of the five civilized tribes have their own version of Ibafanga, though that statement is a vast oversimplification. Each of the five tribes have their own rich spiritual beliefs, but in general, when it comes to expressing those beliefs, these people do share a few common threads. For example, to one extent or another, each of the five tribes celebrate their beliefs with ceremonial dancing and music. Among the Creek, dancing and music are ways to pay homage to the one great force, Ibafanga, and the Creek believe celebrations with dancing and music strengthens one's mind, body, and spirit, and stave off the fourth element, sickness. They also believe if one separates oneself from Ibafanga, nature, and the unity of communion with their own people, then sickness is inevitable. To my way of thinking, these traditions seem sensible, wise, and healthy. There's nothing weird about them. To illustrate how the five tribes express their beliefs through spiritual communion with nature, I want to look briefly at a 4-day celebration called the Green Corn Ceremony, or Busk, or Busqueta, again, pardon the pronunciation. I should note that the Green Corn Festival, as it is also called, is still celebrated in several places around the U.S., though the event may not adhere strictly to the traditional format I plan to describe. The purpose of the festival, as far as I can tell, is to celebrate a new harvest. It is a way to put the previous year behind and move into the new year with a clean slate. With that said, here's a general description of how Busk might have been celebrated in the 19th century. On the first day of Busk, celebrants arrive and they greet each other. They greet the people from their own tribes and from other tribes. Several tribes would celebrate the green corn ceremony. They would set up their individual campsites, generally gathering with others that shared their tribal heritage. As the first day progressed, they prepare and share a great feast using what's left from the previous year's harvest. Later in the evening, participants might join in an informal stomp dance to help encourage a spirit of celebration going forward. On day 2 of Busk, which is a day of fasting traditionally, 4 brush-covered arbors are constructed in each of the 4 sacred directions. Ceremonial dancing commences, and with the women's dance, the ladies' dance, or a ribbon dance, in which the ladies attach ribbons and bells to their legs, and the purpose of the dance would be to purify the grounds and prepare for the construction of a central bonfire. The master of ceremonies would then oversee the lighting of the fire and offer portions of the new harvest, corn, beans, grain, whatever, as a form of atonement for wrongdoing in the past year. A few individuals, perhaps tribal medicine men or other spiritual leaders, would then be designated to transfer to their individual camps portions of the fire, the central bonfire, and then they would be asked to keep that fire going throughout the coming year. Meanwhile, each household within the tribe would traditionally clean their hearth or wherever their central fire was, and then they would rekindle a new fire from the fire brought to their camp by the medicine men. Other forms of celebration or worship might include ritual scratching or pricking of skin, where a little blood is drawn and the scratch would then be rubbed with ash from the new fire or corn water and clay. Participants would often also share drinks or tea as a ritual way of purifying themselves internally. On day 3, the feather dance, or men's dance, would happen. The men would engage in ceremonial bathing, perhaps in a nearby stream. Meanwhile, the women began to prepare a feast to end fasting that evening. Remember, this entire process is about a purification for the new year. Before the meal, there would be stomp dancing and music. Finally, that evening, all of the groups would gather for a great meal and to end the fasting. At that point, celebrations would continue throughout the night with stomp dancing, food, and general communion, and a great celebration. On the 4th day, there would be a final morning dance, and then most of the participants, or perhaps many, again, I don't know specifically, I'm talking about something from the 19th century, would return to their homes for the coming year, though the celebration might continue on for another 3 or 4 days after that. It's kind of a loose thing. The thing is, some sources say it would last 7 or 8 days. Others have stories about this specific 4-day format. Anyway, the green corn ceremony might have other things that went along with it. For example, the green corn ceremony often included a special celebration, not unlike a bar mitzvah or a quinceañero, which not a quinceañera but a quinceañero, which is for boys. And the idea there is that you mark the transition of a 13 or 12 or 13-year-old boy from puberty into manhood. Those celebrations would also include dancing and feasting and exchanging of gifts. As I said, the green corn ceremony or festival is still held in a few places around the nation. If you're interested in attending one of those events, however, be aware that in some cases, as in, say, Bixby, Oklahoma, the event isn't really much like the format I described. It doesn't do much in terms of celebrating Native American culture. That doesn't mean you can't find events that celebrate indigenous peoples of the Americas. I'll include a link in a website that lists Native American events around the nations There are dozens of such events each year, and I've been to a couple, and I've met some really nice folks. So if it's something you're interested in, check out powwows.com. It's really got a lot of great stuff. That's it for today's Plate of History Beans. If you're interested in learning more about spirituality among the 5 civilized tribes or the green corn ceremony, I'll have a couple of links in the description below. Also, if you enjoyed my content, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. I would truly appreciate your support. Thanks again, and see you next time on the Contemporary Old West channel with B.F. Biles.